Shabbat Shalom. Guys, like I always say, got about 13 minutes or so to talk to all of you about good stuff, about love and romance and passion. But if you don't think that you can stay for the full 13 minutes or so, which is about a third of what we do on the High Holy Days, you can go out, come back, but I prefer that you stay. But if you stay, you have to listen to words of passion and love. Now, I often reflect on how baffling and complicated human beings really are. We're such a piece of work, noble in reason, infinite in faculties, in action like an angel, and in apprehension like a god. We're capable of mercy. We practice friendship. We receive and give love. And yet, even these are often sullied by the clay of human composition. Our moments of greatest enlightenment are often eclipsed by inexplicable darkness. We are capable of feeling admiration and envy at the same moment. We are driven by compassion and ego in the same act. We can be charitable and uncharitable in one fell swoop. For every elevated impulse in us, it seems that we're pulled down by an equal and opposite impulse. We see it publicly every day. In politics, business, and community, leaders whose naked ambition is disguised as a calling. Plato equated the human condition to that of a charioteer whose horses pull in different directions. We try to ride the right road of life, but these wild stallions of our personality keep pulling us in opposite directions. It's even the case with love. Now, love is a uniquely human affair. All living creatures are driven by the reproductive instincts, but only we experience poetry and passion. But love, too, is baffling, perplexing, and its purity is often coarsened by darkness. Love can be selfless and selfish at the very same moment. We have this precise condition in the Torah portion of the week, Vayetze. Jacob saw Rachel from afar. He fell in love with her even before she arrived at the well. When she approached him, he wept. It's the first time in the Bible that we encounter tears. And these tears are not tears of grief or loss. They're tears of love. It was a love unlike any of that described in the Bible. Jacob's love for Rachel burned with the fiery passions of deep, unquenchable desire. He kissed her. He kissed her even before he spoke. It's the only time in the Bible that a man kisses a woman who is not his mother or his wife. That fact alone caused centuries of angst amongst the rabbis, who tried to explain away the brashness of Jacob while preserving the modesty of Rachel. Rachel was the daughter of Jacob's uncle Laban. Laban had a second daughter, Leah, who was older than Rachel. Alas, apparently, Leah was not as beautiful. In one verse, the Bible contrasts Rachel's gorgeousness, Yifat Torah and Yifat Mar'eh, stunning inner and outer beauty, to Leah's ordinariness. She had weak eyes, says the Bible. Laban took Jacob into his household. After a month, he asked, "Tell me, what shall be your wages?" Jacob responded, "I will serve you for 7 years if you give me your daughter Rachel." So strong was his love for her. And in one of the most beautiful verses in the entire Bible, we read, "Vayihu ve'enav keyamim achadim." And the 7 years seemed to Jacob like but a few days, because of his love of her. Such is the power of love to condense time and events. Such is the power of love to put a lid on our selfishness. Jacob, who had been so selfish before he met Rachel, threw 7 years of his life into the well of his bottomless love. After 7 years, Laban convened the wedding feast. But when evening came and darkness fell, he took his older daughter, Leah, and unbeknownst to Jacob, it was Leah who cohabited with Jacob. That's the reason that to this day, Jewish grooms lift the veil of the bride under the chuppah before they recite the wedding vow, just to make sure that the right person is behind the veil. Jacob, of course, was angered by the deception and frustrated by his unrequited love. He married Rachel too the next week, but in exchange for his promise to work for Laban for another 7 years. It would prove to be an interesting household. The Bible tells us clearly that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. But analyzing those dynamics, frankly, is beyond my pay grade. Even Freud couldn't have explained it all. What I'm especially curious about is one moment in time in the life of Rachel. What was she thinking at the moment of the deception? The Bible is completely silent. What went through Rachel's mind as she observed her father replacing her with Leah? She was one of 3 people who knew of the deception. Laban knew, but we can easily understand his motivations. He wanted to marry off the older and less beautiful daughter. Leah knew. Her motivations were obvious too. But what about Rachel? One word from Rachel to Jacob, who had slaved over her for 7 years, and Jacob would have found a way to save all of them from what turned out to be a large, unhappy future. Why did Rachel go along with the deception? What possible motivations could she have had? Even had she known that Jacob would marry her the next week, she would still be condemned to sharing Jacob with her older sister, with all of the stress that this entails. She could have had Jacob entirely to herself. That's what Jacob wanted. Rachel was at the crossroads of the selfishness and selflessness of love. To reveal the deception or to allow it to proceed. She had the power to control the outcome. One word from her, and her lover would have swept her away from that place. Isn't that what we all want from love? To be swept off of our feet, taken away. Love of a man or a woman for us means romance, passion, stardust. This is the selfish part of love. But love also contains elements of selflessness, the giving of ourselves to others. It is not all receiving. It is giving as well. At the wedding feast, Rachel could have chosen selfishness, but in the end, she chose selflessness. Had she revealed the deception at that moment, under the chuppah, so to speak, her sister would have been destroyed. And she simply couldn't do that to her sister. She rose above her own needs. There's actually a Talmudic passage that confirms this interpretation. We read that Jacob and Rachel anticipated Laban's deception. I have an older sister, the rabbis envision Rachel telling Jacob, and my father will not let me marry you before he marries her off. Accordingly, before the wedding feast, Jacob gave Rachel tokens so that she could place these tokens in his hand at the moment that they were to be wed. In that way, Jacob would know that Laban hadn't tricked him. As soon as he received the tokens from Rachel in his hand, he would have known that Rachel was the bride behind the veil. But the Talmud tells us that as evening fell and night came, Rachel couldn't go through with it. "My sister will be put to shame," she said to herself. So she handed the tokens over to Leah, and it was Leah who placed them in Jacob's hand. In other words, at that very moment, Rachel too became part of the deception, willingly and knowingly. For that one moment, she chose the path of selflessness over the self. Love does not purge us of selfishness, but it makes us more aware of it. And it offers us the tantalizing prospect that at certain key moments in our lives, we may overcome and conquer our selfish impulses. Rachel's choice to forego her own needs, to prevail this one time at this key moment over the needs of the self, is what determined not only her family's destiny, but the destiny of the Jewish people. For we today are the children of Jacob. Most of those children are the descendants of Leah, not Rachel. It was Rachel's fateful choice of selflessness over selfishness in matters of love that set the stage of Jewish history. We never know when one moment of selflessness, one act of kindness, of generosity, one choice of preferring the needs of others to our own needs, we never know when this might change the world. The 19th century spiritual master, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, composed the following prayer that is relevant to us as well. Dear God, teach me to search for the fine qualities in others, to recognize their immeasurable worth. Teach me to cultivate a love for all, for no one is without redeeming value. Let the good in me connect with others until all the world is transformed through the compelling power of love. Amen.